You know, when you think about nonprofits in the harm reduction space, you immediately think life and death stakes, right? But what if I told you the biggest threat they face often isn't what's happening out on the streets? It's actually something hidden deep inside their own foundational documents, just waiting to cause a catastrophic failure when they can least afford it.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at this new frontier for harm reduction. Then, we'll talk about a huge trap a lot of these groups fall into. After that, we'll break down what a real expert actually looks like, how that expertise builds stronger organizations, and we'll wrap up with one crucial question you really need to be asking.
So for the longest time, harm reduction was this grassroots thing, right? Kind of working in the shadows, on the margins. But that has all changed. I mean, fundamentally. We are talking about a completely new era for this work.
And get this, we now have an official federal definition from SAMHSA. And the words they use here are so important: practical, transformative, and community-driven. This isn't just about handing out supplies. They're framing it as a whole philosophy of empowerment. And listen, this isn't just some definition buried in a government report. This is now a federal drug policy priority. It's at the very center of the White House's strategy. I mean, talk about a massive shift from the margins straight into the mainstream. This really shows you the whole journey, doesn't it? It starts way back in '83, with activists just doing what needed to be done. Fast forward to 2021, and boom, the first ever Federal Harm Reduction Summit. And then, just a year later, it becomes a national priority. That's decades of hard, often unsanctioned work finally paying off. Okay, so here's the catch. All this new recognition, it comes with a ton of new funding, a lot of new people getting involved, and a whole new level of scrutiny, the kind these groups have never, ever had to deal with before. So the big question becomes, how do you navigate all this? How do you thrive without compromising your core mission?
And that brings us to the bad guy in this story. What we're calling the generic playbook. You know what I'm talking about? That one-size-fits-all advice that seems like a good deal, but it's actually one of the biggest dangers these organizations face right now.
Let's really break this down. The generic playbook, it's all about cheap, easy templates. Sounds great, right? But then you look at the reality of the work. We're talking legally and politically messy. It's literally life or death. It's built on a deep history of social justice. It changes constantly. A simple template? There's just no way it can handle that kind of complexity.
This quote here from subject matter expert Chad Sabora just hits the nail on the head. People think handing out naloxone makes you a harm reductionist. It doesn't. There's this massive disconnect. The work is so much deeper than just the stuff. It's a whole philosophy. And that's exactly what the generic playbook misses.
And the consequences? They are huge. Using some boilerplate nonprofit template or hiring a lawyer who doesn't get this world, well, you're basically building weaknesses right into your foundation. You're setting yourself up for predictable failures, huge legal risks, and you could even lose all that new funding you just worked so hard to get.
Okay, so if the generic playbook is the trap, what's the way out? Well, the solution is a totally different kind of guidance, one that's built on a really deep, layered understanding of this field. It all comes down to finding a true subject matter expert.
So, what makes someone a real expert in this space? It's not just one thing. It's what we're calling the expert trifecta. It's three things: deep-rooted lived experience, serious legal and policy know-how, and proven leadership on a national level.
All right, pillar one, lived experience. And look, this is not just some trendy buzzword. This is about a real, authentic understanding you just can't get from a book. It's about knowing what's actually happening on the ground, because you have a real connection to it. That's where trust comes from. That's what makes the work effective. Pillar two is all about legal and policy smarts, and this is so important. A true expert knows that in the world of law, one single word can change everything. Take this example. Advocate Chad Sabora was working on an ordinance in St. Louis. By changing the wording from "an officer shall not arrest" to "an officer may not arrest," they found a way around a restrictive state law. That's not just clever. That's the kind of insight that literally protects an organization.
And finally, pillar three, national leadership. You remembered that official SAMHSA framework we talked about earlier? Well, the real experts, they aren't just reading the guidelines. They are in the room writing them. Chad Sabora was one of only 17 people invited to help draft that foundational document. You really can't get more credible than that.
So, let's put it all together. What happens when a nonprofit gets access to this expert trifecta? Well, they don't just get some advice, they get a real blueprint for how to be resilient, how to be sustainable for the long haul. I mean, just look at the difference here. With generic advice, everything is shaky. Funder confidence is low, legal risk is high, trust is fragile, the whole mission is at risk. But with an expert, you flip the script. Funder confidence is high and stable, risks are handled before they become problems, and the mission itself becomes fortified, built to last.
You know, there's always been this debate in the field. Do you certify the person or the organization? And what the experts will tell you is that the strongest, most resilient groups are the ones that focus on the organization. It can't just be about one charismatic leader. It has to be about building strong, accountable systems that will outlast any one person.
And that's exactly what expert guidance brings to the table. We're talking about 1. Solid bylaws that are custom-built for this unique legal world. 2. Smart, strategic compliance so you're ahead of the game, not just reacting to it. And 3. Accountable systems with real checks and balances that protect both the mission and the people on the front lines.
So, we've seen the stakes, we've seen the trap, we've seen the solution. It really all boils down to one simple but powerful question. And this is for anyone who's running, funding, or even just supporting one of these absolutely vital organizations. So, here it is. Is your organization's future being guided by a true subject matter expert or by a generic playbook? Think about it. Because in a field where there is zero room for error, where the entire mission is about saving lives, the answer to that question could mean everything. It could be the difference between sustainability and failure.